I call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers on May 12th, 2022. We are meeting electronically in keeping with Minnesota Statutes 13D.021 because it is a pandemic and I've made a determination that it's not prudent for us to meet in our usual place of business. In keeping with that open meeting law, all the appropriate sections, we will be taking votes by roll call this evening. So I will begin by taking the attendance by roll call. Manager Hejmati.
Present.
Manager Loftus.
Here.
Manager Maxwell.
Here.
Manager Miller.
Here.
Manager Olson.
Here. Manager
Sando.
Here.
And Manager White is here. All present and accounted for. Mr. Whisker, are there any members of the public with us this evening?
Doesn't appear so, President White.
Thank you. Then we'll move to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Manager Miller moves. Is there a second?
Hejmati second.
Manager Hejmati seconds. Voting then on approving the agenda. Manager Sando.
Here.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell. I'll come back. Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
He's just joining.
Yes. We're approving the agenda, Manager Maxwell.
Yeah, I lost. I went out. I'm back. Sorry.
And we're voting on approving the agenda. What is your vote?
Aye.
Manager White votes aye. The agenda is approved. We have a nice item here under information. Ms. Westerland is here to introduce 3 new employees.
Thank you, President White. Board of Managers, President White, I'm happy to announce that we have 3 new permitting recruits that started with us on May 2nd. Lily Hawk could not be here today, but we have Trey Jonas and Ben Rowland here to introduce themselves. Trey Jonas and Lily Hawk have joined our team as permitting technicians, and Ben Rowland has joined our team as a permitting assistant, and we are happy to have them with us. I will introduce Lily Hawk since she couldn't be here with us today. Lily is joining our team as a permitting technician. She has a degree in civil engineering from the University of Minnesota and has worked for 2 years as an engineer at ISG Inc., designing stormwater management solutions and working with regulatory agencies. I will now turn it over to Trey Jonas to introduce himself.
Welcome,
Hi,
Mr.
everyone.
Jones. Hi.
Thank you. And thanks, Kayla, for the introduction. Like she said, my name is Trey Jonas. I'm one of the new permitting technicians here at the district. Previously, I worked for 2.5 years for the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District in a similar permitting role. And I'm very excited for the opportunity to work here. Thank you.
Welcome. And Ms. Ben Rowland.
Ben, you're muted,
Mic is not working.
or your mic is not working. You're not muted, but your mic is not working.
Is that any better? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. As Kayla said, I am joining the team as permitting assistant, which I'm very excited about. I graduated from McAllister College with a degree in environmental studies 2 years ago. And since then, I've worked at Capital Region Watershed District and Rice Creek Watershed District. But this is my first permit review role, which I'm really excited for.
Welcome. Good to have you. I too graduated from McAllister, so right away we're buddies, right? I'm glad to have you all join us. Thank you very much. On the consent agenda, there is one item, approval of the April 28th board meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Hejmati.
Thank you, Manager Hejmati. Is there a second?
Second, Sando.
Manager Sando seconds. Voting then on the consent agenda. Manager Sando,
Yes.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Miller,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Hitchmadi,
Aye.
and Manager White also votes aye. Manager Loftus, would you give the report from the Operations and Programs Committee meeting?
Yes, President White, thank you. We had one agenda item, and that was to receive a project update on the Taft Legion water improvement project in Richfield. And essentially, we got a status update and the hopeful news that a new polymer might make the project more effective and reach its potential or performance goals, and that staff will be meeting with the city of Richfield next week, and we'll be awaiting some kind of experimental results in the next month or two, and that the committee will hear back again over the summer whether the polymer worked out and whether an alum treatment is agreeable to the city of Richfield. This is a project that was implemented back in 2016 that the watershed partnered with the city of Richfield and been researching ways to make the project more effective. And that was the only item on our agenda, but it was a worthwhile update. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have two items to mention tonight, report on this evening. The first is a report on the Water Summit that was held earlier this week. And then I'd like to get some feedback from the board about returning to meetings in person. So those are my two topics. The Water Summit, as a reminder, was a meeting prior to the town hall that will be the Nokomis paper rollout at the end of the month. And this was an opportunity to bring together policymakers as well as staff. So we had elected officials and managers and staff from MPRB, City of Minneapolis, and the Watershed District. And we all met in person at City Hall. The meeting was convened by Council Member Emily Koski. On the agenda, Mr. Whisker did a briefing on the town hall agenda and presentations. He showed slides to the people there. And Mr. Smith gave us a partnership grounding, talking about the Clean Water Partnership Project that was the award-winning South Minneapolis Chain of Lakes project in the 90s, that the Watershed District, Park Board, City, and also City of St. Louis Park and Hennepin County collaborated on. So it was a really good example, case in point. We had discussion and then the next steps were outlined. The consensus of the group there was that the staff teams will meet to identify projects that we can work on together, all three groups, and coordinate respective CIPs, perhaps an MOU or maybe a cooperative agreement. And the goal is to have it done by the end of 2022. So the third goal that we met beyond the CIP and the MOU was to continue to keep the policymakers involved. So at about roughly halfway through the remainder of the year, another 3 months, and then at the end, the policymakers and this group will come together once again to see, check on progress and check on the final result. So I would say that was very successful. But there were some broader understandings expressed also or shown. One is the really solid support for the idea of partnership, and another is recognition that this is just one project, Nokomis is, that there are many water quality projects, including those identified in the Parkway Plan, and that it relates to climate change too. Councilmember Koski said this could be a case study for climate work, further climate work, and Public Works Director Kelleher talked about replicating this kind of partnership approach in other parts of the city with other watershed organizations. So I thought that we did a very successful outcome. And of course, success doesn't come without good, thorough preparation. So kudos to all. But I'd like to open the floor, as it were, to Manager Hitchmadi and Manager Miller, the other liaisons to South Minneapolis who are also there. Manager Hitchmadi, do you want to have any observations you'd like to add to my comments?
Sure. First, I want to appreciate the very thorough work that our staff has done the fact that everything came together and came together as well as it did is really based on very careful preparation. They threaded the needle beautifully. And I want to acknowledge, just like you did, I want to acknowledge what a great job they did. And that part of the reason for the success was that they threaded the needle so beautifully. And so that's, it's kudos to all of them for doing that. The second thing was that I was very impressed with Margaret Anderson Kelleher and how how her executive ability and her vision. And I think that she will be I hope that she attends the other meetings, because I think she will be a great help. Her vision and her abilities will help us all in moving forward. So I feel very optimistic having her there also. And I agree that the meeting went extremely well, and I'm looking forward to putting together a very successful partnership.
Thank you. Manager Miller, was there something you'd like to add?
Well, I think it was a great rollout for the Nokomis area groundwater evaluation study. And I think it was well accepted. I've been attending meetings in City Hall since I was 18 years old. So, you kind of get a reading of, and that's a long time ago, but I still remember it. So no comments about that. Seldom do you have so many departments and so many agencies involved in which there's no conflict or apparent conflict. That was the good news on the rollout. The MOU, we've yet to figure out whether the city council is going to drive that or the mayor is going to drive it. It's pretty clear that with this new charter, that the city council is not going to have anything to say about operating the city, but setting policy. And I think some sharp council members can do really a lot with that function, not having any responsibility to carry it out, but lay out the policies. So I would normally be pessimistic about having a city council member leading this drive, but I think she's got enough goodwill and she's competent enough, and I think the mayor will, with all the other enormous issues the city is facing right now, I think that he'll see the benefit of getting involved in this an issue, particularly in far south Minneapolis, where a lot of his support comes from. I'm really impressed with the rollout. I'm cautiously optimistic about the ability to work with the city in the near term, because we got to remember this involves hundreds of millions of dollars citywide, if not more, and it's going to take integrating this need into all the other capital needs the city has. So it's going to be a very, very interesting study in local government. We're all going to go to school here. I think we're doing everything we can. And I really want to thank Lewis Smith for the work, his background and hard work over the years really was the catalyst for getting everybody's attention on the MOU, because he made the presentation and gave some background, and with his credibility that he's had working on so many different kinds of cooperative efforts with the city. It really helped a lot. And thanks so much, Louis.
It was a good team. Thank you. Do managers have any questions they want to throw at us? Okay, the town hall, the public meeting where the paper will be presented, the results of the Tacoma study, is on May 31st. Then getting on to the in-person meetings, the president or a city's mayor, whatever, has the authority under the statute to make the declaration of meeting in person or virtually. And so, but I don't want to make that decision without making sure that I get input from the board. So some of the things that I've looked at are the survey data on the board preferences. I've just seen, the aggregate results. The countywide data the CDC puts out, and looking around and seeing what other units of government are doing. The board survey, every manager responded. Thank you all for doing that. The strong majority of the board was comfortable with the current state of the pandemic. And there was a broad comfort level with a range of meeting formats, Zoom, in-person, hybrid. In terms of in-person or remote, there was actually a majority of the board was in favor of going to in-person. That would, and it was a 5-2 vote. 5 members were ready to go to in-person at the time the survey was done a couple of weeks ago. And all of the board members said that they were open to sharing their vaccination status, vaccination booster status. The community spread level in Hennepin County was updated by the CDC over the weekend from low to medium. To put numbers to that, in January, the community caseload in Hennepin was 360 people for 10,000. In March, down to 10 people per 10,000. Right now, it's a little bit up at 48 per 10,000. We wouldn't be the first unit of government to move back to in-person meetings. A lot of the cities have done it for quite a while. Minneapolis has now gone to meeting in person. They were one of the later groups to do that. And it seems that Hennepin County sounds like Hennepin County is going to go to in-person in June. So those are our peers. So based on the survey data, including comfort level, willingness to share vaccination status, thinking about what our staff's protocols are for COVID, looking at the CDC data, looking at other governments, recognizing that we don't have hybrid capability, nor does the staff for that matter. The supply chain has been holding all that up. But knowing that in-person meetings allows us to build a sense of team and generally have deeper discussions, I'm going to recommend that we move back to in-person meetings in June. We would follow the masking requirements that are consistent with those applied to staff under that regime. And right now that is mask recommended but not required. And then managers will share their vaccination status. And we could ask staff to look at whether there's some limited options for social distancing during board meetings at the dais, how we would manage the dinner, for example, things like that. So I wanted, test the waters, see what, there's a water pun, and see what the board is thinking, knowing that we can always react quickly to any change in status if we need to, and then any suggestions that you might have for ways of transitioning back to in-person meetings.
Manager Loftus, President White has her hand up.
Thank you, Manager Loftus.
I was gonna thank you for your thorough review of the issue. I'm willing and excited to get together in person, and I think the example of Hennepin County is a strong data point for me. So the fact that we would be somewhat mirroring their return to in-person in June makes a lot of sense to me. So I definitely support your recommendation. Thank you for the thought you've put into it.
Thank you. Sorry, I grabbed a cough drop and making noise here. Manager Miller.
Speaking of COVID, right?
No, I just used my pulse oximeter. It's 98. I'm good. I'm good. Manager Miller.
I also support in person.
Do you have thoughts about how we go about it, if there are things we should do to make it easier? If it's a no-brainer.
Manager Maxwell has his hand raised.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell.
I'm comfortable with going back, but I want to know how quick say all of a sudden the numbers start going up, how quick can we adapt to not, is that just an easy call just by you, just to say, like June, they'll go to July or something like that? If the numbers start rising, I just want to make sure we have flexibility to say, wait a minute, this isn't smart to do right now. Let's go back a month.
I would guess that it's the same 3-day notice for a board meeting, but let me see if Mr. Smith has other thoughts about that. Do we have to give a lot of notice?
I think the 3 days notice would be adequate.
Mhm. Does that
Okay,
sound?
that's enough. Yeah, then we're good. I just want to make sure
Manager Hajmati?
Yes, I wanted to share with the other managers that while I would really like to meet in person. I really miss that. I really value being able to have the direct interactions, and it's something that I would prefer. However, I have a personal reason why I'm feeling hesitant, which is it's very personal. It has to do with the fact that my wife had a stroke last year, and she reacted badly to being vaccinated, and she cannot be boosted, and so I have to be very careful. I mean, essentially, I'm operating as though I'm in the middle of a pandemic, with where I go and what I do. So I have to really think about how. I was trying to think of what are the conditions under which I would come back. I think one of the conditions that I would request, and I'm not asking that it be done, I'm just requesting it, is that everybody be masked. I think that would be one thing that would be really important for me. Second one would be to get a sense of, and James, you probably know this already. What are the air exchange rates in the board meeting room, and is there anything we can do to improve that? And a third would be, is there anything we can do to clean the air, like even in that room having air cleaners that filter out viruses and things like that.
President White,
Yes.
Manager Hejmati, believe it or not, I don't know the air exchange rate in the boardroom, but we can look into it and we can certainly implement some of those measures. Not to be funny, but I think that based on the number of times the HVAC cycles when we're in there, I'd say that it's pretty good. There's usually a stiff breeze blowing in there, but I'll talk to Deb and we will actually look into that and talk to our vendors and look at what we can do, social distancing with the HVAC, with any kind of supplemental air purifiers, and we'll find something that seems reasonable if the board sees fit to follow President White's recommendation. On the question of masking, obviously I defer back to the board and President White. We've been following sort of the low, medium, high transmission levels that the CDC publishes for the county based on masking requirements versus recommendations or optional at a staff level. So I'm happy to follow the board's lead on that if we want to adopt sort of a custom tailored or special practice for board meetings until situation changes or people are more comfortable.
Thank you for that information. Any other input here? Well, thank you very much. I will make the decision, and of course, let everyone know, and it will be published so that the public knows as well. That's 4 weeks out before that first meeting in June. So watch the numbers too. Thank you very much for joining in the discussion. Appreciate it. Upcoming meetings and the CAC meeting are noticed in the agenda. And we'll move to item 12.1, the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie Trail Interpretive Plan. I believe Ms. Brown could not be with us this evening. Mr. Haven.
Good evening, Chair White, managers. Let me share my screen and confirm that you all can see my presentation and hear me. Are you seeing the presentation slides?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Well, again, good evening. I am before you this evening to facilitate a conversation around interpretive elements at the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie Restoration Trail and revisit the discussion regarding the seating opportunity at the easternmost portion of the trail. As you can tell, I am not Anna Brown. I'm going to pinch hit this evening as Anna had a personal matter that she needed to tend to and does not allow her to be with us this evening. So having been involved in the design of the site from the onset, I'm confident we can work our way through some options and have a great discussion around the project opportunities. So as you recall, about a month ago, the board awarded the construction contract to urban companies, including 4 alternatives for interpretation. The only alternative we did not accept was for the crushed granite material, as there was nominal benefit to implementing that material from an initial cost and long-term operations and maintenance standpoint. At the time of the award, the board raised questions and concerns regarding accessibility and maintenance, potential vandalism at the Sky Lounger seating area and directed staff to evaluate alternatives for seating at this location. The project was awarded as designed and bid, so if the board opts to modify the seating option, that will be done via general construction change order process, which is a very low lift. One last thing to note here before we move on is Manager Miller advised the board that at one point he recalled security fencing around the barn, or a decision about security fencing around the barn, but noticed that no fencing existed today. So we did go back, pull the chronology of the board consideration, and found that that was a conversation. Back in 2013, the board passed a motion to preserve the red barn and adjacent concrete silo that's on the former Halverson property, so one of the many parcels that comprise the prairie restoration site. In April of 2013, the district contracted with Matson, McDonald, and Young to actually provide a condition review and assessment report. That report summarized the current condition of the structures, identified repair work that was needed in the immediate future, identified repair recommendations for long-term, as well as some recommendations for improved security for unwanted access to the structures. And in May of 13, due to cost and vegetation management interference, staff had recommended against expending funds at that time to install fencing around the barn, but recommended other security measures such as permanently securing the doors and windows. And that was the recommendation approved as part of Resolution 13061 when the board authorized expenditure of funds to secure and repair the structures. And that work was subsequently done in June and July of 2013. So that is why there's no fencing presently on the site. The barn and silo are secure, and the fencing alternative was omitted as part of that board approval.
Can I just comment? There was a fence up, around the barn. That's my only point.
Manager Miller and managers, I certainly can talk to Tiffany more about that. As we're looking through the chronology, if there was a fence up for security purposes as they were securing it, or for some other reason, I can definitely get more information on that.
Thank you.
You bet. So to facilitate the conversation around the interpretive plan this evening, I'm first going to walk the board through the interpretive goals for the site, and then detail the watershed moment, which is the location where the Sky Lounger seating area exists. We'll then review alternative seating options that staff has evaluated since the last meeting and facilitate a conversation around a final direction. So much of the interpretive plan reflections will be familiar to the board, as it is grounded in our early 2021 discussions. It's influenced by a mid-2021 community engagement effort, and then it evolved through various PPC design briefings and final design approval. I will note the loungers were introduced in July of 21 and were carried through the design process from that point forward as some of the other interpretive elements were modified or removed. So through development of the interpretive plan, we heard similar themes emerge from public input, from the board, and from our consulted interpretive designer and landscape architecture team. Some of those elements were that the site should create a meaningful engagement with the landscape, and that people can tend to feel overwhelmed if they're unfamiliar with a particular site or the vastness of the site, or that the landscape, while being expansive, should also comprise intricate and observable features. So find a way to make people understand the smaller components of this vast space. That interpretation should be reflective of the unique characteristics of the site and how these characteristics are underpinned by water, which isn't always recognized on an upland prairie. That the interpretive elements match the high design standard that was set by the interpretation at Wasserman Lake Preserve, but be customized to this site. And then lastly, that the scope of interpretation not overpower the rustic character of the site, but complement it and cause people to connect with the site. And so it was that input that led the project and the interpretive experience goals that are listed here that you see on this slide. And along with these goals and experiences noted, you'll see the 4 locations, and these are the 4 that were awarded. There is some changes that have occurred. The barn location, for instance, is the main accessible feature for all visitors to the site. It will have the accessible area near the barn with picnic benches and other seating options. And then in the lower left-hand portion of the 4 interpretive elements, that sign that's shown as a pedestal, a ground plane pedestal, is no longer ground plane. It's a 3-dimensional sign that is upright. We didn't change the graphics from 60% on, but they are different and were presented differently to the board through the bid award process. And we'll get into some of these details a little bit more. As this image notes, this is the location that was developed as the sensory moment within the context of the site and the watershed. So it provides vast views over the prairie and 6 Mile Marsh, which you can see some of in these photos here that are on the site. The trail alignment is slightly modified, actually. It's slightly modified to a little bit more of an oval. So based on grades and the restored wetlands on site, it's more of an out into an oval and back to the barn. It doesn't have some of the sinuosity that was originally envisioned once we field fit it. So to show you in a little bit more detail, because one of the elements that's difficult to contextualize in images is the location and the grade of the loungers and how they're intended to be positioned on the site. The loungers are actually located off of the main trail on a spur, and they're slightly down gradient of that main trail. There will no longer be the mode component to this trail or that pedestal sign. The watershed sign will actually be positioned where the red box is. So it's a 3-dimensional sign that demonstrates our watershed as a whole, with the loungers then positioned slightly down gradient on that said spur trail. And it's intended to be more of an exploration or curiosity component where people would go down there to experience it. That mode trail and that pedestal sign were removed at 90% design as the project was further advanced through design. But I thought this was a nice image to give a little bit more context as to where the loungers position as it relates to the main trail. And then regarding the loungers themselves and the questions that were raised by the board during the April 14th meeting, first around accessibility. So the trail meets ADA accessibility grades, but the trail material is of course granular, which is not always a preferred material for ADA access, and in particular for wheelchair access. It does meet the grades and is a compacted granular trail, but that is one thing to consider. The Sky Loungers do include wheelchair space next to the loungers to encourage accessibility or wheelchair users to access the same experience without needing to transition to the lounger. But there are a variety of grades and undulations on the site that do make traversing the trail a little bit of an adventure to actually cross the prairie and get out to this location. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Regarding maintenance and vandalism, the netting material is a fiberglass wrapped steel fiber filament. So it cannot be cut. The only vandalism potential would be burning. And so the lounger structure itself is steel, and it's placed in a concrete foundation, so they are robust. They can't be bent. They are obviously fireproof and completely immobile from a theft standpoint. The cost of replacing the net, if it were damaged, is around $400. And then lastly, I just went back and revisited some of the design goals for this particular location and just wanted to provide those for the board as you start to look at some of these alternatives that we do have some images for tonight. We wanted to encourage people to stop along this lengthy trail hike and relax, have a full sensory experience, sort of immersing themselves in the sights and the sounds of the prairie and the sky. So our designer talked about being able to lounge, lay back, close your eyes, and just sort of take in the area. It wasn't envisioned as a typical rest stop along the trail. The barn and the picnic area is the location where groups were intended to gather, picnicking, or users in need of a more gentle or conducive seating area would rest. There is also the goal of attracting a variety of age groups to use this site, including younger users and maybe what would be considered a more playful experience at a relatively remote location on a remote trail. And then, just the notes in a lot of our early design considerations around the vastness of the site, that this is a lengthy hike across rolling terrain. And even with an aggregate trail, users who visit the location will have actually gone out and endeavored to adventure. So it isn't your typical park trail experience. And having been out there on Monday, I was reminded how rolling it actually is. It's a pretty phenomenal site. So the loungers were envisioned as just one component of this holistic prairie and watershed experience, not simply a place to sit down and catch your breath. So we can certainly achieve the latter. I just wanted to remind the board of that design intent as you consider some alternatives. And so following the April meeting, staff regrouped, we regrounded ourselves in those design principles so we could really effectively analyze other seating options for the site. We looked at a variety of alternatives and wanted to ensure we weren't viewing them as simply a place to sit, but as part of this greater experience with the views, the sound, in an opportunity to relax. Also explore options that would meet the original intent of the design, that would conform to the character of the site, and would really work in conjunction with that watershed sign, that 3D sign that's sort of imploring you to look out over the site and over 6 Mile Marsh. And as I walk through these design options, so the board is aware, we have identified costs for materials only. So we don't necessarily account for change order pricing dynamics. We, of course, would have to work through the contract with the contractor. And lead times may fall outside of some of the construction windows, or which could potentially impact feasibility of alternatives, depending upon how we could actually get material into the site. Within each alternative, I will provide a bit more detail based on those principles and those considerations. And so the first would be a classic Adirondack option. The pricing doesn't include freight or security of the structure. That is something we do need to consider, obviously. And then the lead time for delivery is a bit unknown, but not a really large component, so not difficult to get out there. So there are the positives to something like this would be that the style generally meets the site character. It's a classic seating option. It encourages relaxation. Adirondack chairs are generally the most affordable option and can be done within our established budget. From a con standpoint, they still may be difficult for some park users to get in and out of. And without proper security of the fixture, there of course is a risk of them being moved or stolen, but there are options for cabling or chaining them and using concrete and other components. So it's not something that is out of the ordinary. Adirondack chairs are used in other park settings. A second option is a little bit newer spin on loungers, and something that actually is in I'll have to look at which park, a local park recently used something very similar to this. They're slightly more contemporary, but generally do meet the character of the site and align with the design intent. So, and could potentially be done within our established budget, dependent upon material and freight. Likely a little bit more of an accessible feature if we're thinking about wheelchair or other accessibility users. The negatives are they are expensive. They could be susceptible to vandalism and maintenance because of the wood components, and the lead time might present installation challenges given the construction schedule, and we'd have to look into the difficulty of actually installing them, but certainly a viable option for a different lounger type. The third is a timber-backed bench. We would certainly recommend a back on these given the location. This is a very common feature. I'm sure you've seen these in a variety of parks. The positive to something like this is it meets the site character, certainly aligns aesthetically with the site, and can be done within the budget. The negatives are that they're not necessarily comfortable. They don't encourage a user to stay for a long period of time. So while aesthetically a good match, it doesn't necessarily align with the design concept, but it would function as a good standard bench, and could function in this location if that's the desire. And then lastly, the fourth alternative is limestone block, which we have used on a variety of other sites. It is very user-friendly. It's unclear if a backed option could be implemented. That would be something challenging. The positive is, of course, it fits our aesthetic and could be done within our budget. The tricky thing with the limestone is that they are very heavy and may not be feasible for us to get those into the site based on the current construction timeline. We don't know. It would depend on the lead times, but it's likely the contractor is not going to want to install these after the trail is laid. The trail is not going to be designed to take large vehicular weight and then add into it the weight of an actual limestone block. And then, although it does meet design intent, they're not necessarily comfortable. They can be cold because of the stone nature. But overall, again, this could be a challenge, could be the more challenging, although maybe the typical and a very common seating component on a lot of our projects, because we didn't bring it in at the onset. Timing could be an issue with this particular alternative. So in summary of options, unit costs really range from around $700 for a single occupancy Adirondack to up to $2,900 for the driftwood bench with the back, the large timber bench with the back. There does remain some cost uncertainty on freight, of course, and cost for securing or anchoring these to the site, any additional change order pricing, and possible second mobilization costs dependent upon lead times. I think options 1 and 2, the Adirondack option or the lounger option, probably align most closely with the design intent. And by that, I mean the experience component of it. The others do fit aesthetically, certainly. And it's hard to, give a low cost without all the various factors fully fleshed out to tell you that this would be the least expensive. But I think there is a scenario here with some of these options where the lowest cost alternative would certainly provide savings. It would come in under budget from the current bid price, which, so the board is aware, the bid for the spur trail and 2 loungers is $16,000. We didn't have the contractor break out explicitly what the material and grading would be versus the loungers, but the loungers in conversation, I think we're around 5,000 complete, steel cabling, security foundation, sonotube concrete. So I know this is a lot of information to digest. And so, fortunately, I think it also characterizes the design intent and the goals for the experience on this site. Given all the information tonight, I might suggest that the easiest direction forward is maybe initially a straw poll amongst the board on a preferred seating option, or I should say, is there a majority that would prefer a shift in the seating design, or or do we like the initial experience, design, lounger aesthetic after we've revisited the concept?
Well, let's do that straw poll.
Well, I just got a comment first before the poll. Is that okay?
Certainly.
How much land do we have out there?
Managers, there's about 210 acres of land.
How much have we paid for it?
Total land sales were right around $4 million.
Okay, I don't think that the expense on the benches should be a major discussion item. The cost is insignificant, and I really, the designers can talk about the experience and everything, but that they're I suppose they can get an award or something if they got a great experience, but I'm talking about just folks like me walking out there and sitting down and enjoying it and making sure that it's not subject to vandalism and it's got some permanency about it. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Other comments? So you would vote to keep the plan, to keep the lounger as is, if you were voting?
If you're talking to me?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, I would go with the limestone or the Casota stone. You know, and if moving it is a big deal, then just get a bunch of smaller pieces. You know, I could see that 15-foot long one being an awfully a big burden to get to the site, but 3 5-foot pieces wouldn't be that big of a deal.
A tractor with a
Thank you.
wagon.
Yeah.
With the way a farmer would have done it.
Manager Olson, what's your thought?
Well, as I looked at it, there'd be some, if we were to go with that netting, we should at least have a size that can hold 2 or 3 people. The second thing is we should have some sort of a signage that says, this is not a bracket to hold the solar panel. This is for you to put your butt on. Okay. So, because when I look at those things, I don't know if I walked up to one the first time that I would know what it's for. So, sorry for being obtuse like that, but I'd have to know that it's okay to climb on. I wouldn't wonder in any of those other seating configurations. See, so if there was a sign that says sit on me and enjoy the view. The other concern I had, Michael, is that when you showed that image of the gal sitting on that lower section from the main trail, it looked like all she was going to see is the back of a whole bunch of tall grass. Is someone going to mow the view so that they can see down the prairie, or are we going to have the grass so tall after 2 weeks that it misses the point?
Manager, also managers, there won't be any mowing. I mean, there will be occasional burning, but also the grades here and how you're overlooking a low depression or a hillside down towards 6 Mile Marsh. So although this is more of a seating, and this one's showing her sort of lounging and relaxing, the intent of the two is so if you were to look at the plants at themselves, one is sitting back. This one, for instance, is more of a sitting or relaxation. The other is actually positioned more upright, where you're leaning like you'd almost be on a pedestal of sorts. And so you're nearly standing, but just sort of off of your feet somewhat. And so there are 2 different angles, and one is intended to sort of lay back and look at the sky, which would be what's envisioned here, more of the sky and the across the plain, and the other is to be looking down over the watershed and 6 Mile Marsh.
Thank you. Who else would like to comment?
Yes, I had my hand, but maybe it didn't come up.
Go
Gene,
ahead, Manager Maxwell.
all right, Dick brought up a good point about, trying to save $1 after we spend $4 million on it. My main concern would be about longevity and maintenance on the things that we're trying to do instead of worrying about the cost of the dollar. The wooden lounger, I can't remember that's the stuff now that's made out of plastic that they put on decking that I can't think of the name of it. What's it called?
Like Trex.
Trex, yeah. No, Trex, yeah. Couldn't that be made out of something like that? That's longevity and the maintenance would be a little easier. Once in a while, you have to probably go out and wash it down with a power hose or something like that with it.
Yeah, Manager Maxwell, managers, one thing I learned over the last few weeks is, the opportunities are endless in terms of, maintenance and what sort of seating we could put out here. And I should just let the board know, the only reason I was showing cost this evening is because we have an approved construction contract with a bid item for a particular location. not, so wanted to show it within the context of what's been approved. All of these could be implemented within that current bid, assuming freight and, change order costs aren't, exorbitant. So I just wanted to have that information available if the board was curious what some of the costs would be. And I should note also, because I did talk to our designer just on a typical park bench, they're about $1,900. So, I looked at a variety of different ones just to give some context on what's typically spent for, an all steel or steel and wood typical park bench. So right within the same cost context. So it becomes more of an aesthetic to Manager Miller's point, with the limestone or others. There's some certain operations, maintenance, and vandalism considerations that a limestone block, and why we have used it on other sites is for those reasons.
I'll weigh in at this point. I'm sorry, was that Manager Loftus? Go ahead if you would want to. No, okay, I'll speak then.
I was gonna just generally explain. I'm sorry, President White.
Go right ahead.
I voted against it. I voted against it last time, and I just wanted, out of respect for everybody, to explain that I'll be doing the same. And I can certainly appreciate where the majority of the board is coming from, but I certainly have a different perspective. I'm not interested in going outside of a budget. I have no problem making choices in between or prioritizing to make sure we can get in our budget. And I appreciate the history of spending money on something, but that's not compelling to me to over design something currently. So it's my opinion. I don't think it's a bad project. I think it's thoroughly over designed. I think we could probably standardize a lot of this, and I certainly don't want to be outside of the budget. So I know I'm in the minority, and that's fine by me, but I thought I owed you all an explanation of why I'll be voting against it again.
Thank you, Manager Loftus. I'm really taken with it. I like the idea that the posts are going to be sunk in the ground, and it's a really durable material. I also just aesthetically like that open weave look out there with the grasses. I just think it's really compatible more than a solid thing is. And I like the idea that it's unique. Not everybody has it. But most of all, I think the idea of relaxing, when one of the joys of being out there in the prairie is listening to the grasses and the wind, listening to the birds, listening to insects if you're lucky enough to find them. I just think that would be really enjoyable. Other thoughts from managers?
Well, President White, managers, I do have some other, questions we could potentially kick around to facilitate discussion. There really isn't a decision this evening to be made or an action to be called. It's directional. As I noted early, the contract is awarded as designed and bid, but we did hear concerns from managers and differing opinions on the experience, particularly or singularly at this location. So, another element for conversation would be, a preference between this relaxed immersive experience versus that typical seating bench style option. I think this question just comes into play based on what you, Madam Chair, just raised, is that, you appreciate that side of it. I'm curious if other managers have thoughts on that in terms of, the intent being this sort of sensory experience versus a typical seating area. And President White, I do see Manager Olson and Manager Hejmati have their hands up.
Manager Hejmati.
I've been listening to what everybody has been saying, and what you're saying, Sherry, is what comes across to me as really significant. That is that this is this is an experience of nature. And the more we can enhance that experience of nature, that's what we have done. We have gone back and recreated what was there before, and if people can experience that, that would be something that would be important for me. And so I would go with the loungers just for the reasons that you have said, Sherry.
Thank you. And Manager Olson's hand was up. I can't see from where I am.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that the hand is up where the light is. I am willing to go with what's we currently have designed and just see if it works. It's a new concept. I haven't seen it before, so we might be starting a new trend, or it may fail. And almost every one of those park bench alternatives could take advantage of the same footings that are there, and we could update it and go to something else without too much concern. But we could give it a try without very much risk. So I would vote for it based on the fact that we review it and see how it performs.
President White, Manager Miller and Arun have their hand up, but I'm not sure if it's just
I'm
that they
sorry.
left it up.
I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, then Manager Miller, did you want to say something? I only see the speaker, so I'm relying on James.
And President White, managers, I can certainly close the slides to facilitate more of the conversation. The other question I had posed that I had envisioned maybe sparking some additional conversation were, are there other considerations the board feels are lacking at this point to effectively serve users, knowing that we are in a relatively remote environment? It's going to be users either coming on the Dakota Regional Trail or specifically coming to this site to experience the prairie, at least at the onset until it's maybe discovered by more. If there were other considerations that the board feels are lacking to really serve who we feel like will be visiting the site.
Thank you. Manager Miller.
We discussed pathfinders from St. Bonifacius to the site because it's so convoluted travel to get there. You really have to know where it is. Have you explored that at all, Michael?
Great question, Manager Miller and managers. I was actually in correspondence with the city planner in Minnetrista today, and that's one of the things that we have on the docket for conversation. Having driven out there Monday, I was reminded again how there isn't effective signage for getting to this site, and certainly something that we're going to need to explore with the city and see if we can implement along the roadways.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Manager Olson and then Manager Sando.
One of the things that I would like to do is have us evaluate those swings that we're talking about for the Blake project at the little triangle area where we're putting in the multi-person gliders. Those are heavy duty. Those are relaxing. If we don't like the netting, why not put a glider in just like we have or a low, what I'll call a low profile glider. You don't have to have the pergola over the top and all that kind of a thing, but a multi-person glider made out of steel that doesn't need a sign that says it's a seat. Everybody would know it. So we could build it both ways and just evaluate the two alternatives. And if we like the one over the other, we can always move to that in the future.
Manager Sando. You're on mute, Steve.
How's that? Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Very good.
Yep.
I vote for the uniqueness of the netting or the hammock style. I think it's very progressive, but very much lends itself to nature. And then just one suggestion for Mike is when we get this all built out is if the police department in that area is Minnetrista, is to remind them that it's there And it's hard to get to by car, but maybe lease the parking lot or so, once a day or once every 2 days, you drive through there just to let people know that it is protected. So there's no vandalism.
Thanks, Manager Sando. And yes, that is something that actually we were talking about on site during our pre-construction meeting. We used to have cameras, just trail cameras out at the site, and those can be useful. We were talking about other security options with the contractor because, of course, they're going to have some equipment and other things on the site, including there are a couple of homes that actually have really great views of the barn area and some of the prairie area. So I think that along using Eyes on the Park or Eyes on the Prairie, along with conversations with the city of Minnetrista and local police, that's a great point. The other thing I will note, I failed to mention it in the presentation regarding the netting material. Actually, Ani Fernandez, who designed Wasserman Lake Preserve, actually is the other firm that Damon Farber has worked with, who we know has used this netting. They used it in the 2 different locations, but I believe one was Como Park. In a play area, they used it as actually like a tree netting where people are climbing and playing on. And we reached out to them and they said it's been very successful, very limited, vandalism challenges or people trying to cut it or do anything with it. But that they did have one instance where someone tried to burn it with a lighter, but it wasn't significant because it's fiberglass and steel. So just so the board is aware, it has been tested locally from a weathering standpoint as well as user standpoint, and so far seems to be holding up really well.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes, Manager Sando.
Thank you. Can you share with us the starting date and the ideal completion date of this project?
Yeah, Manager Sando, so the bid was awarded April 14th. We had our pre-construction meeting on Monday. Survey work should have occurred out there yesterday. I haven't heard from the contractor yet whether it was completed, but they would be surveying and staking in the site. All permitting was effectively completed today. And so the contractor is expecting to break ground on Monday. So they'll mobilize and really they'll start with just hauling, setting up limits of disturbance, setting up erosion and sediment control, and then starting to bring in stockpiles of granular. So they'll be working their way around the site. The intent is to sequence their way out of the site. So they'll go in and build the majority of the trail, the main trail, and then work their way towards the Dakota Regional Trail. The last component they would actually construct is the connection to the Dakota Rail Regional Trail. That portion of the site is actually paved for about 67 feet or so. It's a 10-foot paved trail, narrowing down to the 6-foot granular trail. So they'll do that last. And as of right now, weather permitting, they feel like it's about a 6-week construction process.
Thank you.
It sounds like the majority of the managers would be content to keep to the plan we have.
Could we do a roll call?
As long as we know it's a straw vote, I guess.
No, I move that we do a roll call.
Manager Hajmati?
What do you? I'm not sure.
What's the motion, Dick? The motion.
The motion would be to accept the staff proposal.
Okay. Voting on accepting the proposal as is. Manager Hajmati.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Miller.
No.
Maxwell.
Aye.
Loftus.
Nay.
Sando.
Steve, you're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. And White votes aye. So 5 ayes. The prevailing idea is to stay with what we have.
Thank you, President White, managers, and certainly we'll be back before the board. I will communicate with Anna and our design and construction team that. And also take into consideration all the feedback from this evening. Manager Olson, your point about ensuring folks know that it is seating, and somehow making sure signage and other components make their way into the wayfinding, so folks can visit the site as well. And we'll report back to the board as construction progresses as well. Happy to take any other questions if there are around the project itself, construction schedule, or other.
Thank you, Mr. Heyman. If there's nothing else for Mike, then we can go to the administrator's report.
Thank you, President White. Just fumbling over my mute button. Yeah, President White, managers, in terms of tonight's administrator's report, I think one thing to start off with are some potential adjustments to board meeting dates. And Sherry, you and I had discussed a few of these. One would be to shift from what is currently June 30th to a meeting on Thursday, June 23rd. And those meetings were set originally when we were contemplating summer mod. So that would just be reversing us back to the second and fourth Thursday, our usual rhythm. And then the other one would be moving from August 25th, which is a Monday, to August 22nd to accommodate the mod summer tour schedule. And sorry, I'm fumbling all over the calendar there because I'm not quite sure what that means.
We go from Thursday to Monday in that
Yes.
case. I
I'm just
forgot to.
from the 25th to the 22nd. I said that in backwards order for some reason. I think the mod summer tour now that's going to be up in the Red River Basin area is set for around Thursday the 25th. So there's a suggestion to move that date to Monday the 22nd. The June dates would simply be getting us back onto regular schedule.
Mhm. Anybody have any negative thoughts about that? Then I would entertain a motion to change our schedule from June 30th to 23rd, August 25th to 22nd.
What about the second one in June is, when is
It
the
would be
second?
the fourth Thursday instead of the fifth. We had moved it, we had changed our schedule
Oh,
to
okay,
accommodate what thought would be the summer tour, now
Okay.
that it's not in June.
okay. And the second Thursday in June is still on as it was before, right?
So the dates
We-
would
we
be
can move it.
June 23rd, which is our regular schedule.
Mhm.
And then in August, we would move to Monday, the 22nd.
Okay, and when is the other meeting in June? Would it be June 9th?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, just checking to make sure that wasn't being shifted. Thank you.
Manager Olson, did I? No. Is there a motion to make those two changes to our schedule?
So moved.
So moved, Hejmati.
I missed the first. Well, someone said they moved it before you, but I'll take Manager Hejmati because I'm not sure who said that. Is there a second?
Second, Olson.
Manager Olson seconds. Voting then on changing the schedule. Manager Miller,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Sando,
Aye.
Loftus,
Aye.
Hejmati,
Aye.
Maxwell,
Aye.
and White votes aye. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, James.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for bearing with me while I was juggling dates and days there. Sorry, that was confusing. In terms of the water, it rained a lot yesterday. So a quick water level update. We haven't done one of those for a while, but it's spring and we're accumulating rainfall and precipitation on the landscape. So right now, Twin Cities metro area, we've received 10.4 inches of precip this year. That's 2.8 inches above what would be considered normal or average. Last night obviously made pretty big contribution to that. The storms dropped somewhere between 1 and 2.2 inches of rain across the watershed. There were 2.2 up in the upper watershed and over 1 in parts of the lower watershed. So considerable amount of rain in a pretty short period of time as well. Before the storm, in terms of the impact that rain had on the landscape, before the storm, Minnehaha Creek was flowing at 35 cubic feet per second with no dam discharge. So the dam's still closed. An hour after the storm, the creek peaked at 314 cubic feet per second. So 10-fold increase in just over an hour directly from precipitation. The creek usually has, it's fairly flashy and it has about a 24-hour subsidence time. So right now creek's dropped. It's currently flowing at 160 cubic feet per second, which is well within normal range and in bank. Current lake level for Minnetonka is 929.12, so it's about 3.3 inches below the ordinary high of 929.4. Like I said, dam's still closed. It's going to remain closed more than likely through next week, just because of the lower than normal water levels that we have right now that we're sitting on because of the deficit last year, and because Minnehaha Creek now has sustained flow through spring, through the rainfall and the snow melt. So we have base flow and flow for aquatic life in the creek. So a little bit of a water update for you there. Next update would be regarding 325 Blake Road. And happy to report, and I can't remember if this has been mentioned previously, it might have just been because I've been in so many meetings with President White and board liaisons, but President White was able to sign the purchase and sale agreement for 325 Blake Road this week. So fully executed with an effective date of May 9th. Congratulations, Sherry, for finally getting that done. Obviously a big step as we keep taking those steps towards implementing a really bold vision for 325 Blake Road in tandem with all of our partners, the City of Hopkins, Hennepin County, Met Council, Bowser Public Facilities Authority. And because we have that PSA now executed, Mike wanted me to give you a few other timely updates regarding the project. So first is just regarding the development. Lattice, as far as they're concerned, are still targeting a summer close for phase 1 of the development. First phase of 8 million would be taken down. So right now, project partners are really turning their attention to the other agreements outside of the PSA that are needed to move the project forward, like the reciprocal easement and operating agreement. Our project, the design is progressing well. Moving towards delivery of 90% plans in June. So Mike and Gabe will be back before you in the next couple of meetings to get 90% design in front of you. And to support that design process, as you know, we have our design liaisons, and we're scheduling a meeting with them to review that design progress, as well as some very early concepts for interpretation, wayfinding, and site furnishing, some of which Manager Olson just commented on this evening. And from what Mike tells me, I don't want to hype it too much because I haven't gotten too much into the details, but he said the design teams developed some pretty innovative and fun concepts for the site. And he's fairly certain they're going to excite the board and provide a wonderful experience for future visitors. So those are his words, not mine. So I'm not the one setting you up to be let down if you're not thrilled with his words. We are on the city front and partnership front. We're still working there. We're working to schedule a joint liaison meeting with the city council liaisons so that we can view design progress, check in now that the PSA is signed. And obviously we have new council member cohorts over there. And what we want to do is start the conversations around the Cottageville Park Cooperative Agreement and start to broach this topic of additional city investment in that triangle parcel at Blake and Lake as part of Cottageville, the triangle parcel south side of the creek as part of Cottageville, and the city's long-term O&M responsibilities for the project. And then finally, sort of stepping out from those concentric circles from the development, our work, partnership, to the broader partners, we have been entertaining, and this is something that's come up in our county commissioner meetings previously. The commissioners seem really excited about this project. They're wanting to get some eyes on the area and the site. So we are entertaining, now that we've moved rapidly out of winter directly into summer, entertaining some kind of site walk or field visit with policymakers to bring them up to speed, meet face to face, answer questions, keep that excitement high, view designs within the actual context of the massive site. And if there's interest, and we can pull you offline, but if there's interest across the board, beyond some of our liaisons, we could probably post that very easily as a public meeting, view it as a joint meeting with city council, and then see how many other partners we can get to the table. We know there's county commissioners interested. We might be able to pull in a couple Met Council members, maybe some legislative representatives, just to kind of keep the excitement and momentum high as we move towards implementation on both halves of the project. So a little bit of a more meaty update there on 325 Blake Road. Next time you'll see or hear back from us on that, obviously June, but I'm going to pause there since that was a little bit of information and see if there's questions, and knowing that we still have Mike on the line if they get too detailed or out of my grasp.
Would we be the hosts, James?
I think so. You mean in terms of like if we gathered everybody?
Right.
We probably want to do that, jointly host with the city, just as sort of a courtesy, because they are our direct partners, and they've gotten us to this point. And I don't know if you had any particular designs or what answer you're looking for, but I haven't thought about that much.
We could do that at Casual Park, couldn't we? And there been the pavilion that they built.
Yeah, we could set up there and make an event out of it, turn it into a pretty fun opportunity to engage everybody at that key milestone.
Plus the new county commission get to see the park then too.
Yeah, I think that's what we're thinking is we're not going to go walk Mount Hayman and climb up the big pile of gravel, although we could open it up. People are really motivated. We could get them some boots, and that could be like part of a challenge exercise.
Yeah, Manager Maxwell and managers. One of the things we've talked about is obviously that would be a joint meeting with Alatus and the city, and we could host it at Cottageville, but then have opportunities for folks to actually walk onto 325, and maybe you have design boards at particular locations. We've actually staked the trail, we've moved it, we've massaged it somewhat to avoid large trees. But there's also an opportunity to have design boards for, let's say it's the stormwater pond as it relates to the restaurant pads. And it's, again, similar to the conversation we're having around the prairie. It's hard to contextualize that there's going to be 20 feet of difference between these grades because the site right now is relatively flat. So we could provide opportunities, and we've even started kicking around with Alatus. They're thinking about trying to get some virtual reality or 3D renderings. So, there could just be an opportunity to help people really understand the site and the context of the site at particular nodes in which they would experience it in 3 to 5 years when it's complete.
That sounds very fun. Real cool.
Manager Miller?
Do we have any idea what time and resources Alatus is going to devote to this project versus the $1.5 billion worth of projects he announced last week, one at Brookdale and one at the Arsenal? Those are game changers, both of them, and I'm just wondering where we are in his priorities.
Well, Manager Miller, managers, I'm sure it's no surprise that we're top priority. When you ask. So, I think the Arsenal site in particular, the TCAP site, is still a long range vision. It's something that it's going to be a bit further out on the horizon versus conversations with Bob and Chris. They have bonding and LIHTC funding and are close to capital funding for building C and preparing to take down this first phase. So they're feeling as though this sets up well with their Brooklyn Center site, and then they're actually in quite a bit of a boom from a hiring standpoint as well. Lattice has brought on about 5 new people in the last 2 months, and so we're seeing additional staffing. We're seeing new faces in our meetings, and really seeing this project transition into that construction group a little bit more out of that development, where my understanding in conversations with their team is that's more in that preliminary development side of things, where they're working those early agreements and trying to understand how those sites will unfold in the coming years.
Mike, can you remind the board what, if there's any target timelines for Alatus showing us financial performance which ties into Manager Miller's question around priority. Like when are we expected to start to see stuff?
Well, James and managers, we would start to see more of the financial pro forma or detailed financial. I mean, we see some of the early costing and construction costing and those elements already, but we'd see their capital stack and how TIF and other outside funding sources are coming into play as part of conditions to close. So we have to be provided all of that information, full books, and a look at how they're financing and capitalizing the site prior to closing on phase one. And then there's a subsequent additional pro forma look and demonstration of financing at even a more extensive level for takedown of phase two.
Right. And with them targeting a summer close, end of summer close, and it being May, have we heard anything from them on when we would start to see those numbers, like target timeline? Is it June or July, or we don't know yet?
We don't know yet, although I did hear from Bob this week. Sorry, I want to make sure I get the right names. They do have their capital sequester partner, Raymond James, is on board, and that's who's going to be leading some of that. And then Redstone, who I'm not familiar with, Manager Miller, others maybe, is going to be servicing some of their debt. So they're pulling their full financial team together, and that's all been decided in the last 2 weeks. And so they're really, and they've really refined their construction numbers. And in our meeting on Wednesday, indicated to the city that, you know, the TIF and other outside funding sources, everything's looking like it's going to square up really well. It's just going to come down to a matter of timing. And so they're looking at how they might be able to work with the city or get creative on timing of TIF for infrastructure versus LIHTC and some of the low-income housing versus other components. But there's a PUD amendment that's necessary as a next step, and that's when they'll have more of a final determination on architecture and design, and then we'll really get into those pro forma numbers.
Thanks, Mike. Dick, do you have another question?
I'll ask it offline tomorrow with Mike.
Okay. Any other questions on 325 Blake Road? Otherwise, I'll move through the last couple of updates. All righty. Well, I think I just mentioned, you know, it feels to me anyway, like we moved right out of winter straight into summer. I like a good spring, so I was pretty disappointed this year that we went from 30 and 40 and 45s and rain to 90 and thunderstorms. But that winter had us cancel our previous CAC meet and greet because we had a 40s and rainy day. And Helen's gone ahead and rescheduled that meet and greet between the Board of Managers and CAC for Monday, June 6th, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Arden Park. And as you guys know, that's a new feature we're kind of experimenting with as a final step in onboarding the new CAC members. But it seems now to time up nicely with potentially moving back to in-person board meetings, an opportunity for the board and CAC to just have some in the flesh FaceTime in a really nice space in one of her most recently built projects. So if you have any questions about that, let me know or let Helen know. And then finally, Brian had let me know that they've, the research and monitoring teams developed a low lift, no cost partnership with the University of Minnesota to study the impact of improved water quality on the aquatic vegetation of Wasserman Lake. So as you know, we've been doing carp management, we've been doing wetland restorations upstream of Wasserman, and we've had 2 rounds of clean water funded alum dosing to Wasserman Lake that's helping move it towards its target goals to get delisted. And the assessment pairing up with water resource faculty at the University of Minnesota and Dr. Ray Newman is going to help the district in a couple different ways. It's going to give us a more comprehensive understanding and narrative around how the submerged aquatic vegetation, so the plants that are below the water, how those have responded so that we can effectively guide dialogue and narrative with lake residents. Because often what happens is when you've got a dirty water state and there's not a lot of aquatic plants, and you go in and we make improvements in water quality, which is received really well. You've got light penetrating deeper, you've got more aquatic plants, Residents don't always differentiate good plants from bad, and so they're just weeds. And then there's a whole conversation around weed management in the lake. So that's a big piece of this, is we're going to have the data to drive informed conversation with residents as the plant communities start to reestablish and come back. That obviously will guide us in the future as we do other water quality improvements and ecology rebounds. So it's going to inform the district's future approach to lake management and vegetation response. And also just raise the profile of the Wasserman Lake alum dosing, because we've got other people studying the work, the efficacy of the work, and what the ecological response has been. I think I mentioned off the top, this is just something that the U of M's pushing, and through connection with us is doing at no cost. So we get some free analysis from the university and gets to guide some of our storytelling dialogue with residents and informs how we're moving forward in the future. With that, I think that for today anyway concludes my admin report. As always, happy to answer questions if there's something that I might have missed that you want to touch on.
Yeah, Jalopis had a thumbs up over there for a minute. She liked that report.
Well, we'll send her the technical report. I know she likes those.
Good idea. The sky is very dark out there. Everybody stay safe tonight.
Really windy in Minnetonka. I don't know how
Yeah.
everybody fared with the storm
Mhm.
yesterday, but it looks like Minnetonka got hit. There's a lot of trees and fences down around the office. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
There's a line of storms just west of the city, coming into
Yeah.
the city right now. So I agree with that. Everybody stay safe.
Good night, everybody.
The
Good night,
meeting is-
everybody.
Have a good night. Be good.
Sherry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.